discussion with staff to talk about state legislative agenda moving forward for the next short session. Try to we want to review with our lobbyists what happened this last session, and maybe talk about some new initiatives during the coming short session next year. Always get a jump on it; it's easier. So we start talking to our elected representatives and senators. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Adam.
I don't have much more to add. So
Or
just kind of open it up.
you just want me to go through this then, or let Josh go through it? Okay. Mr. Josh Weiss from, what's the name of the new group?
Columbia Policy Advisors.
Columbia Policy Advisors. Okay.
Do you notice I got the word Columbia in there?
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, commissioners and staff. Nice to see everybody. Came over yesterday, joined the Water Stargrass tour, which was really awesome, and commend your staff for a great tour. And actually that item is going to come up here a little bit later in our discussion. So here's what I was thinking. Obviously can adapt this however you want to, but I was thinking we'd go over a little bit the last session. Just overview generally how it went, how the WASAC, and I should say more general county priorities than WASAC specifically. How our priorities did. Start thinking about the 26th session. As the chair mentioned, it's not too early. Talk about what's going on for the interim and some actions for thinking about your agenda for 2025, and then obviously time for questions and discussion. I will say if I'm getting too long-winded in any of this, please feel free and cut me off. And if you have questions, please feel free and just ask them as I'm going to. So the 25 session, it was the long one. The major accomplishment for the session in the long session is adoption of the 3 biennial budgets, the operating, capital, and transportation. The operating budget, most people are aware, was the largest in state history, 8.2% increase in revenue with $4.4 billion in new revenue raised through the tax package. And I use that, you'll hear different numbers out there. That's the 4-year number, not the 6-year number. The budget is now up to almost $78 billion in expenditures. And interesting this year, Governor Ferguson, when he went through the bill signing on the budgets, he did a number of line item vetoes or section vetoes out of the budget. In the operating budget, he saved $25 million just through those individual vetoes. And one thing I will say, just as a little bit of a side note, that as we're all learning, it's been a long time since we've had new governors, we're all learning about this governor's priorities and style and interests. I've never seen a governor get down to that level of detail in vetoes. He literally was vetoing out items that were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think there's a learning lesson there for us to practice on the ground, just in terms of what we're going to need to be briefing the governor's office on.
Was it contracts? $100,000 contracts, how they spread the money around Olympia?
It was programmatic. Yeah, it was programmatic items that they're giving out to individual districts or district projects. Right. Yeah. Was that your question?
Well, yeah, I just remember from days gone by that they used to give these contracts to certain individuals that really didn't produce anything, but it was a way of spreading the money around Olympia to certain people.
They were items that were spread around the state. Okay. That some were for nonprofit organizations that were providing certain services or programs.
Okay.
Yeah. They weren't to individuals. The capital budget was a fairly typical biennial capital budget, $7.6 billion, largely bonded revenue. A lot of times when we talk about capital budget appropriations, we talk about the local community projects program, which is through the Department of Commerce and is where a lot of individual jurisdictions or organizations can come in and ask for specific money. Your legislators will ask for money in their districts. The average local community project was $578,000. $1,000. So that's a little bit of context when we talk about our priorities, both in terms of how we did, but also looking forward what to be thinking about asking for. Transportation was also a big year. I think there's been a lot of conversation, discussion about how transportation revenues are generally falling short because gas tax revenue is decreasing. People are buying less gas. So they did not adopt a road usage charge as an alternative to the gas tax, but they did raise the gas taxes across the state. They raised $3.2 billion in new revenue, and that is a 6-year number. And the transportation budget, you can see in total is $15.5 billion in total expenditures. On other bills, there were almost 2,000 introduced, but not quite. 422 passed. Only one was vetoed. You probably heard that was one of Representative Clicker's bills, unfortunately. I don't really know the backstory. A 22% passage rate, which is actually fairly low. Usually we see that around 30% passage. So here's, I said expanded because these are most of all of Wasatch's priorities, and then a few sort of that got added on that were kind of
I do have a quick question on
Yeah.
that. So when you're talking about 22% versus 30%, so was that because everything was slowed down quite a bit as far as talking points and stuff like that? And that's what drove it to make maybe a lower, you know what I'm talking about? There's a battle up there going on and there's a lot of talking points. I was up there in Olympia with Wasatch and they had me up there. I think at the end of the day, believe it or not, in that capital, I was shocked. I had 5 miles on my garden. So I'm talking to legislators and getting them talking points and stuff. So was that part of it, you think, or is it why was this so low?
I mean, I think, I don't know, it's a 10% difference, right? Roughly 10%. That is a market decrease. I think actually it might be more about, I should go back and look at this. It might be that there were more introduced.
Okay.
Yeah, than passed.
Okay, that's
And I-
one or the other. Okay.
Yeah, but don't quote me on that because I'd have to go back and look at that absolute number of never passed. I think as a general rule, we feel like the system, the process, the system can pretty much pass about the same number of bills as it can pass. We can handle that with all the cutoffs, et cetera. We are seeing, I think we had 23 new members this last session. A lot of new legislators with new ideas that want to get bills.
Yeah, like I said, I know that everybody was trying to slow things down. That's you probably are aware of.
Yeah. Okay. I realized that I changed my slide here, but I hadn't changed it for you. So here, it was actually a fairly big year for counties. I highlighted in green the issues that did pass. Note that the CRAB local access road bill there the bill didn't pass, but it was created in the transportation budget. And that was a big win. I mean, it's been a long time since the CRAB board has had a new program added to it. So we still need to get funding into it, but that's a big deal. And I should also say on this slide, I apologize to everyone for all of the acronyms. I just couldn't figure out how to fit it in place. Let me know if you need to know what one of the acronyms is. The Medicaid reprocurement bill was a big deal for Wasatch. I think that's going to make it easier, especially over time, for the crisis system in behavioral health to be pulling more money away from managed care organizations to be getting it into the county crisis response system. I think that is a general theme that we're seeing in the legislature finally starting to pull back from their several years ago when they pulled apart the RSN system and gave all the Medicaid dollars to the managed care organizations. So that was a big deal. The REIT harmonization bill, House Bill 1791, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal for jurisdictions that are able to collect both. This is the real estate excise tax, REIT 1 and 2, your GMA planning county, you can collect them both. For years and years, county advocates we've been trying to get them to meld together the ability to use those dollars for the same types of projects. REIT 2 was much more restricted. And so it was always an accounting pain in the butt because you had 2 different kinds of REIT. They couldn't be spent on the same types of dollars, and they were very limited for how much you could use for maintenance and operations. They had to be spent for new projects. So this, it can be used for maintenance now, and there's no distinction in the 2 different kinds of REIT. So that's something that we've been working on the county level for 15 years or so. So it was nice to see that finally get passed. let's see, I should mention the 1% property tax cap. I think that the legislature was poised to pass that this year. I honestly believe that they were going to do that. And Governor Ferguson firmly put his foot down on that and said he would not sign the bill, which at that point legislative leadership backed out of it. The indigent defense bill would have phased in over time the state's increase to county and city reimbursement up to 50%. They did not pass that. Obviously, they significantly increased the amount of money that counties receive in terms of percentage. It's still not that much money overall, but it's the first time I've ever seen them increase the amount of money they say provide on indigent
Now, when you
defense.
say significant increase per county, let's just see that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was about, I think they increased it to $20 million, if I remember correctly, and they were at about 6 or something. So it was not spread out throughout the state. Yeah, not a significant amount. That is still going to be an issue for WASAC. And I think the debate right now is whether the success that they're having at the Court of Appeals and through their legal challenge is really going to be the main motivating force, and sort of what's the interplay with the Supreme Court caseload standards. So much more to come on that. I don't think I'm going to mention any of these others unless you have questions. Okay. So in terms of our priorities for the session, I picked out, you have in front of you the document. I sort of cherry picked a handful of these. We were very grateful to get another tranche of money in for the recovery center. This was for the housing component of it, $3.8 million received. We were asking for over 7, but that was still a healthy appropriation. We're clearly hearing some fatigue from legislators on us asking for more money on that project, even though this was the housing component, not the treatment component of it. But I should have totaled it up. Matt probably knows off the top of his head, but we've been super, super fortunate in how they have helped with that project.
I don't want to say we always have enough money, but we've done well on that. It's going to open. Yeah, so
We're probably, with that one, we're maybe $21 million in state funds, with probably 16 of that coming from direct appropriations. So our delegation has been extremely helpful.
now it's
Definitely
time
hear
to,
what they're saying there on, maybe look elsewhere.
now it's time to move on to my amphitheater.
Yeah, and to be clear, when I talk about fatigue, I think some of that is also feedback that our delegation's getting from their leadership about, how many times you're going to come to the well with this project. Everybody recognizes our delegation's been awesome. Unfortunately, the targeted urban areas bill almost got through, but did not. I think it ran into traffic similar to the state practice bill. Ran into traffic there at the end of session, just in terms of sort of, we talked about the system can only handle so many. They get to the end of session and they just don't have to. We're pleased to see the $500,000 for the. Yeah, that's great. We did not get anything through on FSAC and the protection of ag land and water. I'm not surprised about that. I think I was pretty frank last year when we were teaming that up, but it's a hard challenge there. We're pleased to see the legislature, particularly in the level of cuts that they did make in the budget for the funding for the quagga mussel response at Department of Fish and Wildlife. That does seem to continue to be a priority for the legislature. And then the last piece there, the financial education, Representative Rude's bill did not make it through. And we saw this year a similar version come from the Senate that was from a majority member, Democrat. So not sure whether or not that's by majority. Any questions or comments there? I would say, generally, I think it was a pretty decent session for us, all things considered. So in terms of this next session, you already mentioned, Commissioner Delvin, it's a 60-day session. It'll be the short session. Everybody is sort of bracing for continued revenue shrinkage. The June revenue forecast did show that were it not for that tax package, the state would be $700 million for this next biennium in the hole. With the tax package, they do have, I'm not going to say surplus, but they do have resources. They are in the black. Everybody is bracing for what happens with the September. There's 2 more revenue forecasts, September 23rd, November 18th. What do those show? The July revenue forecast, they do monthly as well as quarterly. The July collections actually were higher than what the June forecast showed. So it was, everybody's still kind of waiting, but so far the economy actually is better than forecasted. And of course, the other major question in everybody's mind is what's the impact of Medicaid reductions on the state and just other general federal reductions. So we will see, I mentioned the revenue forecast. We'll get a better idea through this fall. The governor's supplemental budget will come out in early mid-December. Agency requests are due in September. They've really told agencies not to be asking for anything that isn't necessary to backfill an actual federal cut or an increase in caseload, really keeping it to necessary items. We're still, I put here, will we see cuts? What policy priorities? We're still, again, trying to figure out exactly what Governor Ferguson's priorities will be. That's not a strike against him. It's just really, everybody's learning more about what his important items are. I started out there with, there's 9 legislative elections this year. You probably saw some of the headlines from the primary this last week. There's a number of elections because a number of legislators were appointed to Governor Ferguson's cabinet, and so they made appointments and now those individuals have to run for those seats. That had ripple effects. So you had a couple of senators move, and now there were House members that were moved up to the Senate, so they have to run in the House. We had a Senate member pass away this last session. The bottom line is that there's really 2 Senate seats that are in play, the 26th over in Pearson, Kitsap County, and the 5th district, which is North Bend, East King County. They're not going to impact the majorities. Even if the Republicans win those 2 seats, they're not going to get back the majority, but everybody's kind of looking at those as what's the voters' reaction to the tax package and to just generally the electoral view in the state. And, the primary is not the same as the general. We only have 28% statewide turnout, but there is no indication based on the primary that voters, at least in the urban areas of the state, are unhappy with Democrats at all. Democrats are faring just fine in those 2 battleground districts. So it's going to be an interesting fall. Just a reminder that bills introduced in last session but not passed are eligible for action in 2026, including our state tax bill. And I will be getting to you in the next probably week, I think, more detailed document that has what I sort of high-graded, what I think are the most important bills to pay attention to that didn't pass that we go back and look at again. And then the first day of session is January 12th. And we hope not to be going into special session. Over this interim, the association will be having 2 legislative steering committee meetings, one coming up in September and then one in November. We've been hearing from WASAC, starting to hear from them about what they're, at least at the staff level, thinking about their priorities will be for this next year. I'm sort of pleased to report that it sounds like staff will be recommending that they ask the association to support a new priority of putting cap recovery limits on torts, particularly for juvenile sex offenses. We have talked about this before, so I think that we could, get behind the WASAC effort on that. I think the issue there is that the state is seeing itself such incredible payouts, over $500 million this biennium, that there's some thinking and hoping that maybe the state sees that they need to do it for themselves. So we get some help from local governments as well. So tracking and participating in the WASAC process and making sure we're lined up and at least aware of what they're thinking. Doing our own outreach to legislators, governor's office staff, building those relationships in state agencies. Yesterday was a great example, Adam, of that with Representative Connors, Representative Clicker were there. We had representatives from Department of Ecology and Fish and Wildlife. And then I would also note that the Yakima Basin Integrated Plan is having a tour of the lower basin on August 26th. The new ecology director, Casey Sixkiller, will be on that tour. So good opportunity there to highlight for him, new director, the importance of YBIP and particularly Lower Valley finally getting some priority. I think just as a little bit of an aside, and we did hear yesterday that there will be interest in bringing forward a specific legislative request for ongoing funding for the Stargrass, I'm not going to say mitigation, but remediation program to the state legislature. It's a little unclear whether that's going to get rolled into the YBIP package of requests this year or if it'll be a standalone. So there's some development there, but I think it's pretty important for the county to be tracking that and supporting it with everything you've got based on what I heard yesterday. And I also would just mention as an aside, now that YBIP is focusing more on lower basin, for so long it's been focused on upper basin and fish projects up in Yakima and Kittitas counties. We really are hearing from some of the YBIP partners that they would love to see more elected engagement on the YBIP process. I think they feel like it's necessary for the sort of political oomph now that they're shifting focus down to this. So happy to engage with you all. I'm very appreciative of your staff engagement.
So me and Al will work together.
You learn about water.
I knew you were going to turn around.
Well, I think it just makes sense. For so many years, Yakima County and Kittitas were driving that process, and it's shifting now. So time is now. In terms of preparing your agenda, I really would love to have any capital budget requests that you have scoped out by end of October. We'll have at least the questions that we need to fill out for those request forms. We'll know what the questions are, and the more work we can get done in the fall, I mean, we don't have to scramble once session has started. Things are going so crazy. I didn't really mention, actually, I skipped a bullet on one of my previous slides, that I really do think that this will be a year to focus on the capital budget. There's not going to be operating budget resources available. I would think it's somewhat similar to the Great Recession, where if you have ideas for efficiencies or ways that the state can be saving money, I think those are going to be welcome. Good ideas to feed up to your delegation. Similarly, it would be good to be prepared if there are particular state agencies or appropriations that you receive that really think you need to protect, because I think there will be cuts on the table. And then really leaning in on making capital budgets going to be helpful. So brings the capital budget requests forward. So on the, generally speaking, aside from capital focus, really recommend that your agenda is focused on items that only Benton County is going to champion. I was thinking about this morning. A good way to describe this would be, it makes a lot of sense to have a list of the items that you'll be supporting that other entities are bringing forward. And what you're really saying on that is you will respond when asked to put effort into it. But on our legislative agenda, I tend to think of it as these are the items that we are going to take the lead in putting forward, and nobody else is going to, without us taking the initiative. And sort of the corollary to that is being realistic about our political capital and resources, being focused. We can't carry everything. And similarly, you guys have been great about this always, but it's important, I think, to reiterate that if your priority is to respond to others' proposals and ideas, which I know is hard given a lot of the proposals that we see coming forward, it's hard not to want to jump in there and get engaged with them. But the more capital and time you spend on that, is just less capacity for County specific requests. So that's kind of my, general framework thinking about how to approach a legislative agenda. I put this on here. You can't quite see it from the smaller screens, but this is a political cartoon from 1907, and the title is "Inclined to Soar." So the issues and concerns about the overall size of the state budget have been with us forever. So I guess just a matter of relative size, right?
I think when I left 13 years ago, I think the budget was 25 billion maybe, and now 13 years. So where's is there any document? Where's the increase been in the state spending? I mean, things have gotten a little. I mean, has the growth of state employees gone up a lot? Is there real growth? I mean, that's what keeps Olympia going.
I'd have to look in more detail and kind of parse that out, Commissioner. I mean, my sense is that the behavioral health funding has really increased a lot, right? The state's spending a lot on that toward payouts. And like for you, for everybody else, everything's just getting more expensive. Right. I should mention, sorry, I have heard in conversations over the last couple of days some ideas about possible legislative agenda items that I should mention, just as possible things that are I think people are thinking about for Benton County. I mentioned the Stargrass request that was for $750,000 in operating dollars, and there's not really clear which agency that would go through, but there's a lot of partners I think would be willing to support that. That might be something worth considering taking a lead on. I know there's a lot of conversation, and we talked before the meeting about with your staff about discussions around shrub steppe habitat and the need for consistency in terms of mitigation. Representative Connors mentioned this yesterday to us. It's a little unclear at this point, I think, to everyone whether there's going to be a legislative ask related to that, but just maybe keeping some capacity on the agenda to put some effort on that together. I know I should have mentioned when I mentioned the list of bills coming back. I've heard that the County Auditors Association is coming back with a bill they had last year that would have affected the auditor's duties, and I don't think that was a big deal for Benton County, but I know that some other counties got really fired up about it. I think Wassac's going to be concerned, so I think that would be a good one to have some discussion and just be aware of. It would be great to not get crosswise on that issue.
What was the concern of the issue? Oh.
So it's a local fight. There's Oh, okay.
And I think the dynamic in Olympia last session was that it looked like a really innocuous bill. I think a lot of people interpreted it as an innocuous bill, and where it's going fine, people saw it as, this is no big deal, we work these things out. But where there was tension, it looked like it was interpreted as a power grab. And so it got ugly. It was not good. And I will just say I inadvertently put Auditor Chilton and also Commissioner Alvarez on the spot here a couple of times today. I didn't even think that. The other one I've heard from you all is the idea of splitting the judicial districts between Benton and Franklin County. And if that's something that's...
I think it's time to go with that again. I mean, last time, the only objection, if I recall, was from one judge who no longer serves. He called over there, and berated a legislator, and so that legislator withdrew his support of that, But I mean, really, there's no real opposition to it. the Herald always, the local paper comes out, so same old tired arguments that no one can ever substantiate. But I think it's time to take a stab at that. They can stand on their own over there. Benton County seems to shoulder the burden of a lot of these joint operations. But I always remind people that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Franklin County will never elect a Superior Court judge from Franklin County because Benton County has more voters. So, I mean, if you want your local representation, I mean, this is the way to do it. So, yeah, I think it's worth going after. I mean, they can, the only thing would have to be would decide on the juvenile court because that's part of Superior Court. But, so, yeah, but I think it's worth going after.
I'll just say, like, 100% I think it's good.
Yeah.
Your thoughts? No, I agree. Yeah.
Josh, agritourism, do you think?
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so there was a bill last year Senator Warnock put forward to deal with sort of the planning aspects, land use aspects of agritourism. It was not ready to go, needed a lot of work. I know the county planners organization has been working this summer to come up with an alternative. I think that what I've heard from Michelle yesterday is maybe that bill's not quite ready even this next session to go forward. And I think there's some concern about maybe just can we hold tight till the planners have more time to really get the work done and bring forward a product that is ready to go.
Yeah. Oh, so Michelle, that task force or whatever you want to call it is still ad hoc committee. They're still working on that.
Turn that key on.
And you guys are working on that too, right? For Benton County, right? You already. Right. Sure.
So yeah, I do have a question on that. So I know Senator Perry Dozer went ahead and was trying to get agritourism bill passed, and it didn't make it through. They tried to water it down, I guess, in the House side of it too. But here's my question: I ran into a bunch of our state reps and a couple of our local senators and et cetera. And I also know that FutureWise kind of blocks those things a little bit. I know that we have two of the board members of FutureWise here in Benton County. I spoke to one probably a month ago and said, "Hey, would it work?" I just want to see what you guys think. Would it work? Because they're because that's what happens. You get these bills, they go over to Olympia, and then they get shot down, potentially from FutureWise or another group. I'm not just going to focus on FutureWise, but I know they have a lot of influence up there, and so they were okay with it. I mean, if we wanted to have a meeting with our staff from Benton County and your work group, whoever that is, along with maybe a couple of those, like Perry Dozer, one of the senators, April Connors, whoever we want to invite in on that. Bring in a couple of those, maybe that gal from, and maybe whoever she wants to bring Future Wise in here and kind of hash it out and talk about it. Maybe that's a good thing to do ahead of time, because then at that time, if they're good with it, and they can figure out what they would support, what they would not support. That would probably be easier to bring that bill across the finish line in Olympia, because in Future Wise, at least any other senators and state reps that are looking at potentially passing that agritourism bill in Olympia, they know what they're dealing with, and maybe they'll get the support of that. And all those, yeah.
Well, in the spring, in May, we had a WASAC meeting and actually invited Future Wise to have some conversations.
Yeah.
With members and respond to a variety of topics. And one of them was agritourism. And, honestly, I think despite their appeal in the Brenzo Spanish Valley where they've been facing rooms in that area, despite that appeal, I think they're a lot more acquainted for other communities.
Yep.
Those that we aren't necessarily planners. And I think that conversation will be, we have a really great conversation with them about that. They're very open.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's in line with the state law for our purposes. But we will probably continue to engage them as a partner in that conversation because we do want it to be successful and for everybody. They did note that we're at an advantage in Eastern Washington because we have so much agriculture. They feel like we have expanded facilities to have other businesses versus Western Washington, which produces much agriculture, especially in the county area. And so they're more open to us having other uses cited on some of these maps.
Yeah, and I think so. Like I said, I think their biggest thing was the word sprawl is a big word to them right now. And so I think I talked to Senator Dozer and stuff, and they were all like, hey, if that works, we're all in. So if we ever want to go ahead and do that, bring everybody in and ask some members of Future Wise to come in, I think that would be very helpful for us on your guys' side for Benton County, Future Wise's side to see what they're willing to do, and then also get the state senators and some of the state reps, because I just have to make phone calls. They would all be willing to make on that. So let's put that potentially as maybe a go. That would probably help using those things.
So typically we put out to other elected, right? Come in with your ideas or what, for your groups like the auditors, the prosecutors, and such, treasurers and all that. So we're still gonna
We're gonna do that.
We're gonna do
Katie and
that.
I are working on that next
Okay.
couple of weeks. I want to take Josh's advice to at least get our capital ideas in mind
Yeah.
by the end of October. That's a little earlier than we've usually passed the whole agenda, but maybe we can just.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up that next about the capital budget from what you said, Josh, that, our recovery center is going to open early next year. The juvenile project's moving along fine. We got the voting center done. Really,
Right now, all of our current capital needs are, other the recovery housing is not fully funded.
right.
We're still working on getting all that together, a combination of maybe some additional dollars. We're gonna go for some federal dollars. We have, frankly, the Recovery Coalition is making a really good community effort to bring in private funding. And so I think with those sources, and then we finish the design, value engineering, look at it, and so we may look at some scope changes there that will potentially reduce the cost overall to get us in line with where we already are. So we'll pursue that avenue and a lot less money. I think, there's a couple of things that we've been discussing. Some commissioners are very well aware of, and some maybe not as much. So fairgrounds event center is one where I think we definitely take a look at making some asks. We have our capital or our master plan there.
Right.
A lot of those projects we have targeted funding over the next 10 years. A lot of them we don't have any funding. So we could look at making a request there for funding for some of these projects. projects on the master plan that could either advance projects that are already identified as funded earlier, or pick up projects that we've even looked at as we've gone through and evaluated all of the current projects.
Yeah, that was my thought, was maybe pivot to the fairgrounds, maybe focus on, like 4-H buildings and such, different kind of funding, different pots of money over there.
There's things in play that widely aware of that we're watching. We're watching very closely what Franklin County is doing. Direction on ability. To me, it's very likely that center would cease to exist. I can't see a private operator coming in and making that successful.
Yeah.
So depending on what they do, there may be less event space than there is now when they want to look at expanding our event space.
Right.
There's about an amphitheater, and obviously when we talked about it the last time, it was kind of this grandiose, hey, let's build a whole big thing down there. But we more recently kind of pulled back and said, well, what if we do a scaled down version of that would be allowed to almost act as a test bed for a large facility, get something done that's a little more basic, but still could host large type concert events in the 8,000 to 10,000 people range, and then expand it. If it proves to be a successful model, we can do that. Tom has talked about connecting buildings 2 and 3. It's seen a weird way those buildings are connected together, inside, half outside. There's 7,000 square feet of space in that space between those two buildings. That might be a project we've got. We've got the 4-H arena. We're putting in a brand new, large arena. The 4-H arena is from the 1970s. It's widely used by the
I agree. So with all our CIP projects, I agree.
Well, Commissioner Day, you along the same lines, thinking about kind of pivoting. Okay. So maybe come up with a list.
There's another one that I need to get some more information on. The project that Miles aware of. We got some funding. I believe it came through the Climate Commitment Action. It's comes through the Department of Transportation. The pathway project to connect Sacagawea Trail where it ends at Cable Bridge to Two Rivers Park. There's no construction funding currently available for that. So right now we're just at $9. I don't know if it's a capital ask or another project type ask that we should be advocating for funding for the program to give us those construction dollars. I think we have a very unique environment right now where we have support from the Corps, we have support from the DOT, community support, and let's take advantage of that.
Every project
The other thing to think about too is you're blessed in the fact that you have 3 legislative districts, right? So for the kind of projects that you're talking about, most legislators are pretty excited for the request, right? And so, you could potentially have. We've been so focused over the last few years on the recovery center, which was a regional. We can actually do some, as a county, some double dipping. And again, we think, talked about this before, but supplemental year 750, no more than a couple of million. The more design and work we've done, the more the last money in.
spent a lot of time and effort on the master plan out there. And start building that master plan. And how many years we spent? 4 or 5 years. It's been a while. It's been a while. So, about Apo, that goes away. That gives us opportunity, keep things going. Oh, no, I would never wish that on a neighbor.
But the reality is, somewhere.
No, when's the convention center slated to be open?
They want to.
Oh, really?
Crank that thing out.
I mean,
Within a year. Just to the point about both the fairgrounds and our relationship with legislators, Kay is organizing a fairgrounds tour for legislators.
Oh, good.
We've got 4 confirmed already. So we're working on that and giving them a good walk around and talk about some of these ideas.
anything else?
Just with the taxes and stuff and like building wise, we've got approved for a county where all our stuff is design, build, time, material. Is there any way we could push on the state to where, hey, state projects, design, build, time, material, where contractors change order was 10,000, not 100,000, it's 10,000 plus the 8% markup, whatever we agree on. Because again, like I'm looking at the taxes, like the gas tax, where they're saying they're hurting it's because they're mandating all these electric vehicles requirements. I'm like, come on, guys, let's get this figured out and get rid of the electric. Let it be your choice. You want to be an electric car, but put mandating some certain stuff, like especially like is it back there the lawnmowers now? You can't have a gas-powered lawnmower. You can't have a gas-powered weed blower or something like that. It's all these rules have. And it's okay, good. That's good. Okay, to know, but on the WAS side, I appreciate the WAS side for it, and a lot of the community members, those counties that are part of it. I brought it up to Spokane. King County and Pierce County wanted to add another member to the table. Would drop my vote from 100% to 33% because they pay the most fees or dues than any other county, but we're all still paying per capita the same percentage. So I don't mean to be rude, but I stood up and said, hey, I don't mean to be rude, King County, Pierce County. You guys already
Why do everything expenditure
I
function?
want you to control our board and drop in their percentage. And I had honestly at least commissioners from other counties clapping and say,
Oh, I see.
Because it just
It stops the revenue.
I look at our state, being a contractor, being a builder, our state's one of the toughest states to build in, one of the most expensive states to build in because of the energy codes, all these other things that are requiring that don't pay for themselves down the road. And so I wish we could somehow push throughout the counties or legislation and try to focus on it, make it better. Like I have a best friend in Idaho that does the same thing I do. He's building a house for $235 a square foot. I build the exact same house up here, probably $400, $450 a square foot because of the energy codes.
Affordable housing.
That's what's frustrating. It's like they're pushing for affordable housing. And so like long story short, I agree. I think us commissioners, we should try to figure something out and bug the elected officials throughout the state and try to get this a better state. Going to Idaho, even going to Nevada for gas is like $1 cheaper, 80 cents cheaper and stuff. I'm like, holy moly, guys. And then with us being the 5th worst state to retire in, and then also with the roads, we're I think number 3 or 4 in the country for worst roads in the country. And I'm like, well, why are you using tax the wrong way when we're still one of the worst roads? And then safety-wise, I did have a meeting with the sheriff's department several months ago. We're number 5th in the country for most unsafe streets, and we're worse than Nevada. And that was with the sheriff's department because they did a bunch of studies. And I'm just like, come on, guys. I get taxes. I brought it up to the sales tax, really against 2013. But now the commissioner, I completely agree with that. But then the state's also dropping our caseloads for lawyers and stuff. I'm like, come on, state. Let us have local control. Let us do our taxing, our own thing that we want to do.
Going through the sheet, you just go back and forth a little bit on the
Yeah.
You know, we got the court case going through. One in the appeals court now. And was it remanded back to Superior Court, right?
Yeah, but
And
the appeal carried has not gone, so they're not sure if they're going to see it. That was just on the question.
handstanding, right? That was just, but still, with, beloved or not so beloved, the state Supreme Court came up with standards that slowly, let's just slow it down. Slow it down.
Really, ultimately, I like to say it's legislative people. Everybody gets involved. And, to your point, I it's what attacks. We talk about affordable housing, we just went ahead and created another cost for buyers that have to pay for the home state. Excise tax, burns because we're a few states that have excise tax. We don't have a state excise tax out. That would supersede. You need that 50% or 40%. For the state. That's a lot of money. So it drives me crazy when we talk about if we find ways to protect the public. There's a lot of money. Our asses. But I would say, OPD, I would be one to focus on. I do think the message needs to be OPD because
Okay, any final thoughts? Brenda?
I'm still thinking, I'm still trying to,
Yes.
We were talking about, Josh was talking about, it's not obviously sexy like budget events. Grants, the way that grants or direct appropriations are rolled out, we're looking at a legislative request to change that process. We're a massive bottleneck of funding that we have. We're still trying to get our contract with the Department of Commerce for a direct appropriation we received 4 years ago. Still can't access those dollars. So it would be nice to, you were saying there used to be a program like that, certainly. I think have a conversation with the legislature about let's change the ways we use funds. I mean, I get some of the competitive grant programs first, we got all those. We've spent money. We're floating like that money now and trying to figure out how to juggle our funds around. Not know what that is with expense on a regular basis. Because we're waiting to get millions of dollars back from this conversation.
Maybe
We
something.
had a great one. I don't know how it meant to be that way, but we got a grant from the DCYF for the juvenile center, and we called them up, and a week later we got a check. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like public works department. They have their own staff. They process stuff great.
And I don't blame. I mean, I appreciate. Their staff is significantly changed right around COVID. I started all these programs right before COVID. I had 4 grant managers, 4 grants I had to go after COVID down to 1 person. And she's the entity that she works with. So they need to, if they're going to run that lean, they need to roll out. I don't know if that's legislative ask to that, but it's, we can't deal with stuff. You want us to build and do stuff. We're in a very fortunate position. We can float $5 or $6 million. There's a lot of
Correct.
During the recession, we were successful in getting the money that goes to your health department, the county for public health, that used to go to the Department of Health. We take an administrative cut off of the top. And we were successful in getting the legislature now in the back of the budget to say for each county, public health, treasurer, right?
That was the other thing, Commerce does take 5% off the top.
As a public entity, you're still subject to audit requirements. If you misappropriate those dollars, you're going to get in trouble. So I don't know if there's other grant programs like that where you have a regular distribution. But I mentioned earlier, those are the things that I do. This is the kind of fiscal environment where they, I think, have to take those kinds of ideas seriously. It saves them money.
We definitely have operational grants that function that way. We just get an allocation on a monthly or quarterly basis. We don't have any capital ones. They're all reimbursed.
Do you see any, I know that in other counties, are there any requests from other counties that would be missing?
There is some work going on around emergency management and both in terms of needing funding for local emergency management, but then also, probably shouldn't say this in public session, I'm not totally sure this is accurate, but if I understand correctly, moving the emergency management function out of the military department. So that's something that might be of interest.
The other big one that we're not alone in struggling with it at Liberty County. I'm not sure how we make an ask for that one because we've already all approved it. But we're also
This probably is not as much an issue for you, but the jail modernization task force final recommendations will be out at the end of this year. They released a progress report in July. It sounds like there will be some legislative discussion around the program for counties to access to get regular maintenance dollars, rehabilitation. It would have been useful right when the juvenile center was. I haven't heard you talk as much about the jail here as I have in other jurisdictions.
we do pretty well with the maintenance and operations. Partner with our cities and they help pay for that. We have an appreciation fund. That doesn't mean there aren't projects that we want to do. Juveniles, we had to pay $5 out of our operating sales tax. We didn't even get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be, some of those counties are built over capacity. Build something new. We're doing well on capacity. That's why we signed a contract with ICE. But apparently the state law prohibits that. Yeah, there's
If I might have personal note, I just want to say thanks for all of your staff's work, your support as I transition. Just really appreciate it. I say this, hope frequently enough. Your staff is the best. Really appreciate it. Yeah, no, I understand. But no, really appreciate Katie coming on board has been great. Adam, Matt, and Jared. During session, I should also say that there's a lot of work on those capital. But just appreciate the partnership.
Hey, quick question though. Is that Jerome in that picture? That sure looks like Jerome.
1907,
Yeah, looks like Jerome right there. The bald head, the belly. Like Jerome. Never known, man.
We're gonna live long enough now. We're gonna live long enough now. to see that.
Happy Halloween.
Wait, anything? And with that, then,